In the early hours of August 2nd, 1990, the world changed in a matter of hours. Iraqi forces crossed the border into Kuwait, triggering a crisis that would ignite the Gulf War and reshape global politics overnight. What began as a regional conflict quickly escalated into an international standoff, drawing in superpowers, oil interests, and a coalition unlike anything seen before. This is the story of the invasion of Kuwait, the spark that led to the Gulf War, and the moment that shocked the world awake. Welcome to History of Conflicts. At 2 a.m. on August 2nd, 1990, the border between Iraq and Kuwait, a largely unmarked line drawn by British colonial administrators decades earlier, ceased to exist. 100,000 Iraqi troops, spearheaded by elite Republican Guard divisions and supported by over 700 tanks, poured across the frontier in a coordinated blitzkrieg that would erase a sovereign nation in less than 48 hours. The invasion of Kuwait was not a border skirmish or a limited incursion. It was a full-scale conventional conquest, the first time since World War II that one United Nations member state had completely annexed another. And it happened with a speed and brutality that shocked the world into realizing the Cold War's end had not brought peace, it had merely changed the rules of war. This is the story of those 48 hours, of miscalculation and aggression, of heroic last stands and desperate escapes, and of the moment when the international community drew a line in the sand and said, "No more." But to understand why Saddam Hussein gambled everything on this invasion, we must first understand what brought him to this point. In the summer of 1990, Iraq was a nation on the edge of economic collapse, a paradox for a country sitting atop some of the world's largest oil reserves. The reason was simple: debt. For 8 brutal years, from 1980 to 1988, Iraq had fought Iran in a war that killed over 500,000 people and devastated both economies. Saddam Hussein had launched that war expecting a quick victory over a revolutionary Iran in chaos. Instead, he got a grinding stalemate that nearly bankrupted his country. To finance the war, Iraq had borrowed heavily, primarily from Kuwait and the United Arab Emirates, fellow Arab states who had bankrolled Iraq as a bulwark against Iranian revolutionary expansionism. By 1990, Iraq owed Kuwait alone an estimated $14 billion, a staggering sum for a country whose economy was shattered. Saddam Hussein saw this debt differently. In his narrative, Iraq had sacrificed blood and treasure to defend the Arab world against Persian aggression. Kuwait and the Gulf states had merely contributed money, which, in Saddam's view, was the least they could do. The debt should be forgiven, not collected. Kuwait disagreed. But the debt was only part of Saddam's grievances. By mid-1990, oil prices had collapsed to around $13 per barrel, a catastrophically low price for a country like Iraq that needed oil revenue to rebuild after 8 years of war and to maintain the massive military machine Saddam had constructed. And Saddam blamed Kuwait. His accusations were specific and incendiary. First, Kuwait was overproducing oil, pumping far beyond its OPEC quota, flooding the market and driving prices down. Every dollar drop in oil prices cost Iraq $1 billion annually in lost revenue. Kuwait, in Saddam's narrative, was waging economic warfare against Iraq. Second, and more provocatively, Saddam accused Kuwait of slant drilling, using directional drilling techniques to tap into the Rumaila oil field, which straddled the Iraq-Kuwait border, and stealing Iraqi oil. Iraqi officials claimed Kuwait had extracted $2.4 billion worth of oil that rightfully belonged to Iraq. Whether these accusations were accurate or exaggerated was almost irrelevant. What mattered was that Saddam believed them, or found them useful, and that he presented them to the Iraqi public and the Arab world as justification for action. Through July 1990, tensions escalated. Iraq massed troops on the Kuwaiti border, initially 30,000, then 100,000. Kuwait, a tiny nation of just 2.1 million people, most of them foreign workers, watched nervously. Diplomatic efforts intensified. Egypt's President Hosni Mubarak shuttled between Baghdad and Kuwait City, trying to mediate. The Arab League convened emergency meetings. On July 31st, Iraqi and Kuwaiti delegations met in Jeddah, Saudi Arabia, for last-minute negotiations. The talks failed. Kuwait offered minor concessions, some debt forgiveness, a temporary reduction in oil production. Iraq demanded full debt cancellation, $10 billion in compensation for stolen oil, and territorial concessions, including control of Bubiyan and Warba Islands, which would give Iraq better access to the Persian Gulf. Kuwait refused, and the Iraqi delegation walked out. One meeting in particular would haunt American foreign policy for years. On July 25, 1990, Saddam Hussein met with U.S. Ambassador April Glaspie in Baghdad. The conversation, later leaked, would become one of the most controversial diplomatic exchanges in modern history. When Saddam complained about Kuwait and hinted at military action, Glaspie responded with what she later insisted was standard diplomatic language: "We have no opinion on Arab-Arab conflicts, like your border disagreement with Kuwait." Saddam interpreted this, whether correctly or conveniently, as American indifference. If the United States had no opinion on the dispute, then America would not intervene if Iraq took military action. It was a catastrophic miscalculation, one that Saddam would pay for dearly. But in late July 1990, emboldened by what he saw as American acquiescence and frustrated by Kuwaiti intransigence, Saddam made his decision. By August 1st, over 100,000 Iraqi troops and 700 tanks were positioned along the border. Western intelligence agencies noted the buildup, but most assessed it as saber-rattling, a show of force to intimidate Kuwait into concessions. They were wrong. At 2 a.m. on August 2nd, 1990, the invasion began. August 2nd, 1990, 2 a.m. The invasion began with a coordinated assault across multiple axes. Elite Republican Guard divisions, the Hammurabi and Medina Armored Divisions, crashed across the border in overwhelming force. These were not conscript units but Saddam's best troops, well-trained, well-equipped, and loyal. The Iraqi plan was textbook Soviet combined arms doctrine: overwhelm the enemy with speed and firepower, seize key objectives before resistance can organize, and present the world with a fait accompli before anyone can respond. While tanks raced south along the coastal highway toward Kuwait City, Iraqi special forces launched helicopter-borne assaults deep into Kuwait. Mi-8 and Mi-17 transport helicopters, escorted by Mi-24 Hind gunships, flew low over the desert, carrying commandos tasked with seizing key facilities: the airport, the royal palaces, government buildings, radio stations. The Kuwaiti military was small, just 16,000 active duty troops, and completely unprepared. Many soldiers were on leave. Units were scattered at bases across the country. There was no mobilization plan for a full-scale invasion because no one truly believed Iraq would dare. They were being overrun before most units even realized they were at war. The first major objective was Kuwait City itself. Iraqi helicopters landed commandos at key sites throughout the capital. Gunfire erupted in the pre-dawn darkness. Residents woke to explosions and the sound of automatic weapons. At the Kuwait International Airport, Iraqi commandos stormed the terminal and seized control within hours. The small Kuwaiti garrison fought briefly but was overwhelmed. By dawn, Iraqi forces controlled the airport, preventing any possibility of reinforcement or evacuation by air. The fiercest fighting took place at Dasman Palace, the coastal residence of the ruling Al-Sabah family and headquarters of the Emiri Guard, Kuwait's elite protective force. When Iraqi forces approached the palace in the early morning hours, they expected token resistance. Instead, they encountered Kuwaiti soldiers and palace guards who chose to fight. The battle for Dasman Palace lasted several hours. Emiri guards, armed with small arms and a few light weapons, defended the palace room by room. Iraqi commandos used grenades and RPGs to blast through doors. Helicopter gunships fired on the palace from offshore, raking the building with rockets and cannon fire. Among the defenders was Sheikh Fahd Al-Ahmed Al-Jaber Al-Sabah, a member of the royal family and a colonel in the Kuwaiti military. Rather than flee, he chose to stay and fight alongside his men. He was killed in the fighting, shot multiple times while defending the palace. His death made him a national martyr, a symbol of Kuwaiti resistance against impossible odds. By mid-morning, Dasman Palace had fallen. The surviving defenders were killed or captured. The palace was ransacked, furniture smashed, artwork stolen, the building itself left scarred and burning. But the most important target had escaped. Sheikh Jabir al-Ahmad al-Sabah, the Emir of Kuwait, the head of state and symbol of Kuwaiti sovereignty, had been at Dasman Palace when the invasion began. In the chaotic early hours, as gunfire echoed through the palace, the Emir's security detail rushed him out of the building and into a waiting convoy. They fled south, racing toward the Saudi border through back roads and desert tracks, Iraqi helicopters searching for them overhead. At several points, the convoy came under fire. Vehicles were hit. Security guards returned fire, creating diversions to allow the Emir to escape. The journey, normally a few hours, became a desperate hours-long flight for survival. By late morning, the Emir crossed into Saudi Arabia and safety. His escape was critical. It meant Kuwait's legitimate government survived in exile, maintaining legal continuity and the international recognition necessary to rally support for liberation. If the Emir had been captured or killed, Kuwait's cause would have been vastly more difficult to champion. While commandos seized Kuwait City, Iraqi armored columns swept across the country. The Kuwaiti military, scattered and outnumbered, fought in isolated pockets. Some units resisted fiercely. Others collapsed. Most simply had no chance. Iraq's small navy played a supporting role, seizing Kuwait's ports and coastal installations. The Kuwaiti navy, consisting of a handful of patrol boats and missile craft, either fled to Saudi Arabia or was destroyed at dock. The Kuwaiti Air Force, with fewer than 80 aircraft, attempted to resist. A-4 Skyhawks and Mirage F-1s scrambled to intercept Iraqi helicopters and aircraft. But they were hopelessly outnumbered. Some pilots managed to escape to Saudi Arabia, flying their aircraft to safety. Most were destroyed on the ground or shot down. By the afternoon of August 2nd, less than 12 hours after the invasion began, Iraqi forces controlled Kuwait City, the airport, the major highways, and all strategic infrastructure. Pockets of resistance continued, but organized Kuwaiti military resistance had effectively collapsed. August 3rd saw the consolidation of Iraqi control. More troops poured across the border, mechanized infantry divisions, artillery brigades, air defense units. By the end of the day, Iraq had deployed an estimated 140,000 troops in Kuwait. Some Iraqi units continued south, reaching the Saudi border by August 3rd. The world watched in horror, wondering if Saddam would stop at Kuwait or continue into Saudi Arabia, a move that would put him in control of over 40% of the world's oil reserves. The speed of the conquest stunned the world. In 48 hours, a recognized sovereign nation, a member of the United Nations and the Arab League, had been erased from the map. Television networks broadcast images of Iraqi tanks rolling through Kuwait City, of the Kuwaiti flag being torn down from government buildings, of Iraqi soldiers looting shops and homes. The images were surreal. This was supposed to be the new world order, the post-Cold War era of peace and international cooperation. Instead, the world was witnessing naked aggression, unchecked and unapologetic. On August 2nd, the United Nations Security Council convened in emergency session. By the end of the day, they had passed Resolution 660, condemning the invasion and demanding Iraq's immediate and unconditional withdrawal from Kuwait. Iraq ignored it. Because Saddam Hussein had no intention of withdrawing. Kuwait was not occupied, it was annexed. And what came next would shock even those who thought they understood Saddam's ambitions. On August 8, 1990, less than a week after the invasion, Saddam Hussein made it official. In a televised address, he declared that Kuwait had been liberated from the corrupt Al-Sabah dynasty and would henceforth be known as the 19th province of Iraq. Kuwait, as a sovereign nation, had ceased to exist, at least in Saddam's version of reality. To provide a veneer of legitimacy, Iraq installed a puppet government, the so-called Free Provisional Government of Kuwait, led by a previously unknown figure named Ollah Hussein Ali, who who claimed to represent a revolutionary movement against Kuwaiti oppression. The puppet government was a farce. It had no popular support, no international recognition, and lasted less than a week before being dissolved and Kuwait formally annexed as an Iraqi province. But it served its propaganda purpose, allowing Iraq to claim Kuwait had been liberated, not conquered. But not all Kuwaitis accepted occupation. Within days of the invasion, an underground resistance began to form: civilians, former soldiers, students, and professionals who refused to submit. They operated in small cells, using guerrilla tactics, sabotaging Iraqi vehicles, ambushing patrols, distributing anti-occupation leaflets, gathering intelligence for Allied forces. They communicated via hidden radios, coordinated through trusted networks, and risked everything. The Iraqi response was brutal. Suspected resistance members were arrested, tortured, and executed. Public hangings became common, bodies left displayed as warnings. Entire families were detained if one member was suspected of resistance activity. Iraqi forces went door to door, demanding identification papers, searching homes, confiscating weapons. Kuwaitis were forced to exchange their Kuwaiti dinars for Iraqi currency at grossly unfavorable rates, a form of economic theft. Those who resisted were beaten or imprisoned. One of the most cynical aspects of the occupation was Iraq's use of human shields. Thousands of foreign nationals, primarily Westerners and Japanese, who had been working in Kuwait were detained and transported to strategic sites in Iraq: military installations, government buildings, industrial facilities. Saddam openly declared these hostages would be used as shields against potential military action. They were forced to appear in televised propaganda, looking haggard and frightened, while Iraqi officials cynically called them guests. The world watched in horror as Saddam personally met with groups of hostages, including children, patting them on the head and assuring them they were safe, all while holding them as leverage against attack. But perhaps the most shocking aspect of the occupation was the systematic looting of Kuwait, state-sponsored theft on an industrial scale. Iraqi forces stripped Kuwait of everything valuable. They raided the central bank of Kuwait, stealing $1 billion in gold bullion and foreign currency reserves. They emptied museums of priceless artifacts. They stole vehicles, luxury cars, buses, trucks, loading them onto transporters and shipping them to Iraq. They dismantled entire factories, removing machinery piece by piece and reassembling it in Iraq. They stripped hospitals of medical equipment, MRI machines, surgical instruments, even incubators from maternity wards, leaving Kuwaiti healthcare in ruins. The story of babies being removed from incubators would later become controversial, initially reported as fact, later disputed as exaggerated or fabricated propaganda. The truth was complex, but what was undeniable was that Iraqi forces systematically looted Kuwait's healthcare system, causing untold suffering. Libraries were ransacked. Universities were stripped of equipment. Private homes were burglarized. Iraqi soldiers sent stolen goods, televisions, appliances, jewelry, back to their families in Iraq, sometimes using Iraqi military transport. The occupation of Kuwait was not just military, it was economic warfare designed to transfer Kuwait's wealth to Iraq and break the spirit of the Kuwaiti people. As the occupation dragged on and international pressure mounted, Iraq's actions became increasingly destructive. Kuwaiti oil wells were rigged with explosives, not yet detonated, but prepared for sabotage should liberation come. The message was clear: if Iraq could not keep Kuwait, it would destroy Kuwait's ability to produce oil for years to come. But while Kuwait suffered under occupation, the world was mobilizing. And the response would be unlike anything the Middle East, or Saddam Hussein, had ever seen. The invasion of Kuwait triggered an international response unprecedented in speed and scope. Within hours of the invasion, the world's major powers were coordinating, not to contain Saddam, but to reverse his conquest. On August 2nd, the UN Security Council passed Resolution 660, condemning the invasion and demanding withdrawal. Over the following weeks, a cascade of resolutions followed. Resolution 661 imposed comprehensive economic sanctions on Iraq. Resolution 665 authorized a naval blockade. Resolution 678 would ultimately authorize the use of all necessary means, diplomatic language for war. But the most critical question was not diplomatic, it was military. Would Saddam stop at Kuwait, or would he continue south into Saudi Arabia? Saudi Arabia faced an existential threat. The kingdom possessed the world's largest oil reserves, and its eastern province, home to the critical Ghawra oil field and export facilities at Dhahran and Ras Tanura, was less than 300 kilometers from the Kuwait-Saudi border. If Iraqi forces continued south, they would control not just Kuwait's oil but Saudi Arabia's as well, over 40% of global oil reserves. Saddam would dominate OPEC, dictate oil prices, and become the most powerful man in the Middle East. The United States could not allow that to happen. On August 3, President George H.W. Bush convened his national security team. The decision was swift. The United States would defend Saudi Arabia and, if necessary, liberate Kuwait by force. On August 6, Secretary of Defense Dick Cheney flew to Riyadh to meet with King Fahd of Saudi Arabia. Cheney brought satellite imagery showing Iraqi forces positioned on the Saudi border and a proposal: the United States would deploy troops to Saudi Arabia to defend the kingdom. King Fahd faced a dilemma. Allowing foreign, particularly Western, troops onto Saudi soil, home to Islam's holiest sites at Mecca and Medina, was politically explosive. It would enrage conservative religious elements and could destabilize the kingdom. But the alternative was Iraqi tanks rolling into the eastern province. King Fahd agreed. And within hours, the deployment began. Operation Desert Shield, the defensive deployment to protect Saudi Arabia, became the largest American military mobilization since Vietnam. The first units to arrive were paratroopers from the 82nd Airborne Division, flown directly from Fort Bragg, North Carolina, to Saudi Arabia. They landed in the desert with light weapons and little heavy equipment, a speed bump force designed to slow any Iraqi advance until heavier units could arrive. They called it the line in the sand. If Iraq attacked, the 82nd Airborne would fight and die to buy time. But their presence sent a message: an attack on Saudi Arabia meant war with the United States. Over the following weeks and months, the deployment accelerated. Heavy armor, M1 Abrams tanks, Bradley fighting vehicles, artillery brigades, fighter squadrons, F-15s, F-16s, A-10 Warthogs, naval battle groups positioned in the Persian Gulf and Red Sea, logistics units to sustain what would become a 500,000-strong force. And it was not just America. Over 30 nations joined the coalition: Britain, France, Egypt, Syria, Saudi Arabia. Even Cold War adversary the Soviet Union condemned the invasion. It was the largest international military coalition since World War II. Saddam Hussein had united the world against him. The invasion of Kuwait marked a turning point in history. It was the first major international crisis of the post-Cold War era, a test of whether the international community could enforce the principle that borders could not be changed by force. The answer would come 5 months later, in Operation Desert Storm, a campaign that would define modern warfare and establish American military dominance for a generation. But the seeds of that war, and of the conflicts that would follow, were planted in those chaotic 48 hours in August 1990. When Iraqi tanks crashed through Kuwait's borders, they didn't just invade a country. They shattered the illusion of a peaceful post-Cold War world, and set in motion events that would reshape the Middle East for decades to come. The invasion of Kuwait was more than an act of aggression. It was a turning point that redefined modern warfare, global alliances, and the balance of power in the Middle East. But this was only the beginning. The Gulf War had just begun. If you want to explore the full story, from Operation Desert Storm to the aftermath that still shapes our world today, make sure to subscribe to History of Conflicts. Like, share, and comment below. What do you think was the real reason behind Iraq's invasion of Kuwait? Because history isn't just about the past, it explains the present. Thanks for watching.